No one noticed the moment history quietly changed. Not at first. Because in a mansion overflowing with Academy Award winners, legendary directors, senators, millionaires, and the biggest names in Hollywood, nobody was paying attention to the shy young man standing alone beside the French doors. Except one woman, and within the next few minutes, the entire room would stop talking, stop laughing, and witness something no newspaper would ever fully capture. It was the evening of June 15th, 1957. The warm California air drifted through the open garden as crystal chandeliers painted golden reflections across polished marble floors. Everywhere you looked, there was another legend. Frank Sinatra was making an entire circle of guests roar with laughter. Cary Grant stood beside the fireplace telling stories from movie sets that had already become Hollywood folklore. Directors argued over future productions. Photographers quietly searched for the perfect celebrity photograph. Champagne glasses touched. Jazz music floated through the house. Everything sparkled. Everything felt perfect. Yet one person looked as though he wanted to disappear. Elvis Presley, only 22 years old, the biggest musical phenomenon America had ever seen. Millions screamed his name every night. Teenagers waited outside hotels just hoping to catch a glimpse of him. His records shattered sales numbers almost every week. But inside this room, he felt like a nervous schoolboy all over again. Hollywood frightened him, not because of the cameras, not because of the famous faces, because everyone here seemed finished, polished, educated. They spoke about Shakespeare, European cinema, method acting, French literature, subjects Elvis barely understood. He quietly held a glass of Coca-Cola. He never cared much for expensive cocktails. His fingers slowly traced the cold glass while he watched conversations happening all around him. Every few moments, someone approached him. "Mr. Presley, we loved your latest record. My daughter hasn't stopped talking about you. Wonderful performance." He smiled politely every time. "Thank you, ma'am." "Thank you, sir." Then they walked away, leaving him alone again. Truthfully, that was exactly how he liked it. He wasn't comfortable being the center of attention unless there was music playing. Without music, he didn't always know who to be. Hal Wallace, the powerful producer who had invited him, walked past and lightly tapped Elvis on the shoulder. "You having a good time, son?" Elvis smiled awkwardly. "Yes, sir." Hal laughed. "You don't look convinced." "I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing here." Hal looked around the crowded room. "You belong here." Elvis quietly shook his head. "Sometimes I think I belong back in Memphis." Hal smiled knowingly. "You'll get used to Hollywood." Elvis wasn't so sure. His eyes wandered across the room. Famous faces, perfect smiles, elegant gowns. Everything seemed carefully rehearsed. Everything, except one person. Across the ballroom, a woman wearing a simple black evening dress stood near the grand staircase. She wasn't trying to become the center of attention, yet somehow, she already was. She laughed softly at something an elderly director had said. Her smile wasn't dramatic. It wasn't practiced. It was gentle, honest, the kind of smile that instantly made everyone around her feel important. Elvis recognized her immediately. Audrey Hepburn. He had watched Roman Holiday more times than he cared to admit, not because she was beautiful, although she certainly was. It was because she never looked like she was acting. She simply lived inside every scene. Elvis admired that. He wanted that. Every time cameras rolled, he worried about where to stand, what expression to make, whether people believed him. But Audrey, she made it seem effortless, almost magical. He quickly looked away. No reason to stare. She was one of the biggest movie stars in the world. There was no chance she'd even know who. Mr. Presley? The soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Elvis blinked. His heart skipped. Standing directly before him was Audrey Hepburn, close enough that he could see the tiny reflections of the chandelier lights in her eyes. She smiled. Not the smile she gave photographers, not the smile audiences saw on giant movie screens, a real one, warm enough to erase every ounce of nervousness in the room. "Good evening. I'm Audrey." For a second, Elvis completely forgot how to speak. Then he laughed quietly. "Yes, ma'am." "I know." The corners of Audrey's mouth lifted. "I hoped you might." Her playful tone instantly relaxed him. "I'm a great admirer of your music, Mr. Presley." Elvis looked around as though she might be talking to someone else. "My music?" She nodded. "Especially the way you perform. There isn't another performer alive who moves quite the way you do." Elvis felt his ears turning red. Nobody had ever complimented him quite like that. Usually people talked about record sales, or screaming crowds, or controversy. But she had noticed movement, performance, art. "I've watched your films, too," he admitted. "I don't know how you make everything look so real." Audrey laughed softly. "The secret?" She leaned a little closer. "I've been trying to discover yours." Elvis frowned. "My secret?" She glanced around the crowded ballroom before lowering her voice almost to a whisper. "I'm preparing for a new role. There is," she hesitated for dramatic effect, "one rather embarrassing problem." Elvis smiled. "What kind of problem?" "My director insists my character must dance," she sighed dramatically, "to rock and roll." Elvis chuckled. "I see. The unfortunate truth," Audrey continued, "is that I haven't the faintest idea how." She folded her hands together. "So, I was wondering if the king of rock and roll might be willing to teach me." For one full heartbeat, Elvis simply stared. Surely, he had misunderstood. The most elegant actress in Hollywood wanted dancing lessons from him. He couldn't help it. He burst into laughter, not mocking laughter, the joyful laughter of someone completely caught off guard. Around them, a few nearby guests turned their heads, wondering what had just happened. Elvis smiled. "You really mean that?" Audrey nodded with complete sincerity. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't." Elvis looked toward the orchestra, then back at Audrey, then slowly grinned. "Well, I suppose we'd better find some music." Across the ballroom, someone noticed them smiling together. Another guest whispered, "Is Audrey Hepburn talking to Elvis?" Heads began turning. Conversations started fading. No one knew what was about to happen. But somehow, everyone sensed they were about to witness something unforgettable. The room grew quieter with every passing second. At first, only a handful of guests noticed Audrey Hepburn standing beside Elvis Presley. Then someone whispered, "They're dancing." Another guest stopped mid-conversation. A producer lowered his champagne glass. A famous director nudged the man beside him. "Don't look now, but Audrey's talking to Elvis." Within moments, the buzz spread across the ballroom faster than wildfire. Conversations faded, laughter disappeared. Hollywood's brightest stars slowly drifted toward the center of the room, curiosity written across every face. Even Frank Sinatra glanced over from the piano. Cary Grant folded his arms with an amused smile. Grace Kelly paused in the middle of a conversation and turned around. No cameras flashed, no reporters interrupted. For one rare moment, no one wanted to ruin what felt completely natural. The orchestra noticed the growing silence. The pianist looked toward Hal Wallace. "What should we play?" Hal smiled. "I think Mr. Presley has earned the right to choose." Every eye turned toward Elvis. He suddenly looked far less comfortable than he had on stage in front of 20,000 screaming fans. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Now y'all are making me nervous." The crowd laughed warmly. Audrey tilted her head. "I thought performers never became nervous." "Oh, ma'am," Elvis chuckled. "Singing's easy. This," he gestured toward the elegant crowd surrounding them, "is terrifying." Audrey laughed. "Then we're both frightened." Elvis blinked. "You?" "Of course." She lowered her voice. "I've spent years pretending confidence in front of cameras. But asking the king of rock and roll to teach me how to dance?" She smiled sheepishly. "That took courage." Something changed inside Elvis. Until that moment, he had assumed Audrey Hepburn belonged to another universe, a world without fear, without doubt, without awkward moments. But standing before him now, she wasn't Hollywood royalty. She was simply another artist, trying something new. The orchestra quietly began playing one of Elvis's newest recordings. The familiar rhythm echoed through the ballroom. A few guests instinctively tapped their feet. Elvis smiled. "All right. First lesson. There aren't many rules." Audrey raised an eyebrow. "No rules?" "Not many." She looked genuinely puzzled. "But every dance has rules. Ballet does. Waltz does. Ballroom does." Elvis shook his head. "Rock and roll ain't about rules. It's about freedom." She studied him carefully. "Freedom?" He nodded. "When the music starts, you stop thinking. You stop worrying. You stop wondering how people see you. You just—" He tapped his chest. "Listen to what's happening in here." Audrey looked thoughtful. "That sounds beautiful." "It also sounds impossible." Elvis grinned. "Only because you're trying too hard already." The guests smiled. Even the orchestra seemed fascinated. Audrey took one slow breath. "Very well. Teach me." Elvis stepped back. "First thing, forget everybody's watching." Audrey looked around the room. Nearly 100 famous faces stared back at them. She smiled nervously. "I don't believe that's possible." The room erupted with gentle laughter. Elvis laughed too. "Fair point." He extended his hand. "Come on." She placed her delicate hand into his. For a brief moment, Hollywood watched two of the most recognizable people on earth, standing quietly, not performing, simply trusting each other. Elvis counted softly. 1, 2, 3. Feel the beat. Audrey followed carefully. Her movements were elegant, graceful, perfectly balanced, but completely wrong. She danced exactly as years of classical ballet had taught her. Every movement was measured, every step calculated, every turn flawless. Elvis smiled. "No." She stopped. "What did I do?" "Nothing." "That's the problem," she laughed. "I don't understand." "You danced perfectly." "I know. So why is that wrong?" Because, he smiled warmly, you're trying to impress the music. The music ain't asking to be impressed. It's asking you to have fun. For several seconds, Audrey simply stared at him. Nobody had ever explained movement like that. Every ballet instructor she had ever known demanded perfection. Perfect posture, perfect balance, perfect timing, perfect discipline. Yet this young man from Mississippi was teaching exactly the opposite. He leaned closer. Close your eyes. She hesitated. In front of everyone? Especially in front of everyone. Slowly, Audrey obeyed. The ballroom became completely silent. She closed her eyes. The music continued. Soft guitar, gentle drums, a steady heartbeat. Elvis spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. Don't dance. Just breathe. She inhaled slowly. Now, listen. She listened. Forget Hollywood. She smiled faintly. Forget awards. Another smile. Forget cameras. Her shoulders relaxed. Forget trying to be Audrey Hepburn. Something remarkable happened. For the first time all evening, she wasn't thinking. She simply moved. A tiny sway, barely noticeable. Then another. Then her shoulders relaxed completely. Her feet began following the rhythm naturally. Not perfectly, not elegantly, but honestly. Elvis smiled. There she is. She opened her eyes. What? You. The room burst into applause, not because her dancing had suddenly become extraordinary, it hadn't, but because everyone watching could see the difference. She wasn't performing anymore, she was enjoying herself. Frank Sinatra clapped enthusiastically. Now that's dancing. Grace Kelly smiled warmly. I've never seen Audrey look so free. Even Hal Wallace whispered, that's the most relaxed she's looked all evening. Audrey laughed uncontrollably. I still look ridiculous. Elvis grinned. Maybe. But now you're having fun. She nodded. I am. For several joyful minutes. The ballroom transformed. Actors forgot auditions. Directors forgot budgets. Producers forgot contracts. The biggest stars in Hollywood simply watched two artists laughing together like children. The song slowly came to an end. Thunderous applause filled the mansion. Audrey bowed dramatically. Elvis tipped an imaginary cowboy hat. Both laughed. Then Audrey folded her arms with a playful smile. Well, I believe it's my turn now. Elvis suddenly looked suspicious. My turn? You promised. I did? You most certainly did. She stepped closer. You said, I'll teach you rock and roll if you teach me ballet. The smile disappeared from Elvis's face. Oh, I actually hoped you'd forgotten that. Audrey's eyes sparkled with mischief. Oh no, Mr. Presley. A deal. She slowly extended her hand toward him. Is a deal. Around them, the crowd immediately began cheering. Ballet! 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 Elvis covered his face with both hands. Oh, Lord. What have I gotten myself into? The laughter echoed through the mansion as Audrey Hepburn prepared to teach the king of rock and roll the first ballet position. For a moment, the king of rock and roll wished he were anywhere else. Not on stage, not in front of screaming fans, anywhere. Because standing before him now, with nearly every legend in Hollywood watching, was Audrey Hepburn, smiling, patiently waiting. So, she said with playful elegance, are you ready, Mr. Presley? Elvis looked around the ballroom as if searching for an escape. Frank Sinatra folded his arms. Don't back out now, kid. The room erupted with laughter. Even Cary Grant added, You've survived television audiences. Surely you can survive one ballerina. Elvis pointed toward the crowd. Y'all ain't helpin'. Another wave of laughter rolled through the mansion. Audrey extended her hand. Gentlemen always honor their promises. Elvis sighed dramatically. I reckon I walked right into that one. She smiled. You certainly did. Soft classical music slowly replaced the rock and roll rhythm. The sudden change transformed the atmosphere. Only moments earlier, the room had been filled with freedom. Now, everything felt elegant, measured, almost sacred. Audrey stepped into the center of the ballroom. Instantly, her entire posture changed. Her shoulders relaxed, her chin lifted. Her movements became impossibly graceful. She wasn't acting anymore. She wasn't pretending. She was returning to the language she had spoken since childhood. Even before Hollywood, before Roman holiday, before Academy Awards, there had been ballet. Years of endless practice, hours spent bleeding inside worn ballet shoes. Discipline, sacrifice, perfection. Elvis watched quietly, almost mesmerized. I've never seen anybody move like that. Audrey smiled. And I've never seen anyone move like you. She slowly placed her feet into first position. This, she explained gently, is where every ballet lesson begins. Elvis stared at her shoes. They're pointing sideways. They are. My legs don't do that. The room burst into laughter. Audrey covered her mouth, trying not to laugh herself. They're supposed to. Well, Elvis grinned. I think mine missed that lesson. She stepped closer. Try. Elvis slowly copied her stance, or at least, he attempted to. His boots slid awkwardly across the polished floor, his knees bent in strange directions. His balance disappeared almost instantly. Frank Sinatra nearly spilled his drink laughing. Grace Kelly leaned against a chair, unable to stop smiling. Even the orchestra struggled to keep straight faces. Audrey gently adjusted Elvis's shoulders. No. Relax. I am relaxed. No. You look terrified. I am terrified. The room exploded again. Audrey laughed so hard she had to wipe tears from her eyes. Mr. Presley, you truly are impossible. I've been called worse. She shook her head. No. I think you're wonderfully honest. Elvis looked puzzled. What do you mean? She smiled warmly. Most famous people spend their lives pretending to be perfect. You, she paused, aren't afraid to look human. Those words landed deeper than anyone realized, because Elvis had spent the last 2 years hearing endless criticism. Too wild, too loud, too controversial, too different. Parents blamed him. Newspapers attacked him. Television producers demanded he change. People constantly wanted him to become someone else. Yet here stood Audrey Hepburn, one of the most admired women on earth, praising him, not for perfection, but for authenticity. She continued, Now, a simple plie. She gracefully bent her knees. Elegant, effortless, weightless. Elvis copied her. Halfway down, his balance disappeared. His arms flailed wildly. For one terrifying second, everyone thought the king of rock and roll was about to fall flat onto the marble floor. Instead, he somehow caught himself. Barely. The room erupted into roaring applause. Elvis threw both hands into the air. "I meant to do that." Frank Sinatra laughed louder than anyone. "Sure you did." Even the waiters were smiling now. No one cared about fame anymore. No one cared about awards. They were simply watching two extraordinary people laugh together. Audrey stepped beside him again. "You know, I've learned something." Elvis looked over. "So have I." "No," she smiled. "I don't think it's the same lesson." "What'd you learn?" Audrey looked around the ballroom. "So many people spend their lives protecting their image. They're afraid to fail. They're afraid to look foolish. They're afraid someone might laugh." She looked directly into Elvis's eyes. "But tonight, you walked into a room full of Hollywood's biggest stars and let them laugh. Not at you, but with you." She paused. "That takes extraordinary courage." Elvis lowered his eyes. "My mama always told me, if you can laugh at yourself first, no one else can hurt you with it." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The room grew strangely quiet. Audrey smiled softly. "Your mother sounds very wise." "She was," Elvis answered. "Everything good about me, I learned from her." Audrey nodded. "I understand. My mother taught me something similar. Grace costs nothing, but it can change someone's life." Elvis smiled. "I like that." The orchestra slowly stopped playing. Silence settled over the mansion. Then, without warning, Frank Sinatra began clapping. Once, twice, 3 times. Soon, everyone joined him. Not polite applause, not celebrity applause. A genuine standing ovation. They hadn't applauded perfect dancing. They hadn't applauded technical brilliance. They were applauding humility, kindness, joy. 2 artists who had forgotten they were legends and remembered what it felt like to simply be people. As the applause echoed through the mansion, Audrey leaned toward Elvis and whispered, "I think we've accidentally given Hollywood something it desperately needed." Elvis smiled. "What's that?" She glanced around the room filled with smiling faces. "A reminder that greatness begins the moment you stop trying to look great." Elvis nodded slowly. He would remember those words for the rest of his life. But before the night was over, Audrey would make one final request, one that would leave Elvis speechless and touch every heart inside that mansion. The applause refused to end for what felt like an eternity. Hollywood's brightest stars remained standing. Not because they had witnessed the greatest dance performance, quite the opposite. They had watched 2 masters completely fail at each other's craft, and somehow create something even more beautiful than perfection. Elvis looked around the ballroom, almost embarrassed. "You folks can sit down now." Frank Sinatra laughed. "Son, I don't think they're clapping because of the dancing." The applause slowly faded into warm laughter. Crystal glasses clinked once again. The orchestra quietly placed their instruments down. The party was beginning to breathe again, but Audrey Hepburn wasn't finished. She looked toward the orchestra leader. "May I ask for one more piece?" The conductor smiled. "Anything." Audrey turned back toward Elvis. "This time, we won't dance." Elvis looked confused. "No?" She gently shook her head. "I simply want to walk." "Walk?" She smiled. "Yes, without cameras, without performances, without pretending to be anything except ourselves." Elvis couldn't help smiling. "I think I can manage walking." Together, They stepped through the open French doors onto the moonlit terrace. Behind them, the laughter of Hollywood faded into the distance. Ahead, the gardens stretched peacefully beneath the California night sky. The moon reflected softly across the swimming pool. Palm trees swayed in the warm summer breeze. For several moments, neither of them spoke. They simply listened. Crickets, the wind, the distant sound of the orchestra beginning another song inside. Finally, Audrey broke the silence. "Do you ever become tired?" Elvis looked at her. "Tired? Of being Elvis Presley?" He smiled sadly. "More than folks realize." She nodded. "I understand." "No," Elvis chuckled softly. "I reckon you understand better than anybody." She stopped walking. "You know, people think fame removes loneliness. It doesn't. If anything, it makes silence louder." Elvis stared at the garden. "I miss being anonymous. I miss walking into a diner without everybody staring. I miss singing because I loved singing. Not because thousands expected me to." Audrey smiled gently. "I miss riding bicycles." Elvis laughed. "Bicycles?" She nodded. "In Europe, I could disappear. Now, I cannot even buy flowers without someone watching." They both laughed quietly. For a brief moment, neither of them was famous. Neither of them carried the weight of expectations. They were simply two young people, trying to remember what ordinary life felt like. After a long silence, Audrey spoke again. "May I tell you something?" "Anything." "I didn't ask you to dance tonight because of my film." Elvis looked surprised. "You didn't?" She shook her head. "No. I watched you all evening. You stood alone. You smiled for everyone. But I noticed something." "What?" "You looked," she searched for the right word, "lonely." Elvis looked away. He didn't answer, because she was right. Sometimes the loudest applause in the world could never replace one honest conversation. "I thought," Audrey continued softly, "perhaps if someone asked you to teach instead of perform, you might feel less alone." Elvis swallowed hard. No interviewer had ever understood him that well. No producer, no journalist, no executive. Just one woman, who had quietly noticed what everyone else had missed. "You were right," he admitted. "I haven't laughed like that in a long time." She smiled. "Neither have I." The orchestra inside began playing a slow melody. Neither recognized the tune. It didn't matter. They stood quietly beside the terrace railing, looking over the lights of Beverly Hills. After several peaceful moments, Elvis reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a guitar pick. Old, slightly worn. He looked at it for a second, then handed it to Audrey. "I've carried this for almost every performance." She accepted it carefully. "I couldn't." "You should. I've got plenty more." She looked at the tiny pick resting in her palm. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just keep it. So you'll remember tonight." Audrey smiled warmly. "I promise." Then she reached into her small evening purse. Inside, she removed a tiny silver ballet shoe charm hanging from a delicate ribbon. "I've carried this since I was a little girl." Elvis immediately shook his head. "No, ma'am. I can't take something like that." "You must." She gently placed it into his hand. "So you'll remember that even the strongest performers should never stop learning." Elvis stared at the little charm. No expensive gift could ever equal its meaning. They exchanged no contracts, no publicity photographs, no business promises. Only two tiny keepsakes, given with genuine friendship. Years passed. Their careers carried them across different continents, different films, different concerts, different lives. They rarely saw one another again, but every so often, when interviewers asked Audrey Hepburn about the kindest people she had met in Hollywood, she smiled. There was one evening when the biggest rock star in the world wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply wanted everyone around him to smile, and that told me everything about his heart. Years later, friends would sometimes ask Elvis about the small silver ballet charm he kept among his personal belongings. He would smile quietly. "It reminds me that no matter how famous you become, there's always something beautiful you don't know." The legendary Hollywood party slowly became a story shared in whispers. Some remembered the dancing. Others remembered the laughter. But those who had truly been there remembered something else. For one extraordinary evening, the king of rock and roll and Hollywood's brightest star forgot about awards, forgot about fame, forgot about perfection, and reminded an entire room that greatness is not measured by applause, or record sales, or Academy Awards. It is measured by humility, by curiosity, by the courage to look foolish while learning something new. Because real legends do not become unforgettable because they are better than everyone else. They become unforgettable because they make everyone around them feel wonderfully human.